All right, folks. We'll be getting going here pretty soon. I have Lady Shel with me. We will be streaming. We are using line of sight with Zovia Maps. This is one of her patron maps. Lady Shel will put the link to this exact map in the chat later. We're getting ready to get set up here, and yeah, so we'll answer questions and we'll have you guys do whatever you guys want. Stand by.
Ten four.
10-4. All right, folks. This is founder Laerun, and Shel and I are here. We are getting ready to play around with some line of sight using Fantasy Grounds Classic, or excuse me, Fantasy Grounds Beta, Unity Edition. Just remember that this is not the full version, that it is still a work in progress, and anything that I show you now may change or digress or even get better. So, with that in mind, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Lady Shel.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to our stream. I hope you're having a good Sunday.
I'm hoping that everyone can hear Lady Shel as well. Is that good? Everybody hear Lady Shel? Going once, going twice. Okay.
I hear me just fine.
Okay, good.
Thanks, Erlon. Thanks,
Hello,
Calagatio. Hello.
Telegasio. All right, so we're gonna get started. Right now, I have Unity up. This is the beta version. And before I get into doing the line of sight, first of all, I'm gonna say I'm not doing the entire map, but I will do the main centerpiece. I'm going to try to touch on different aspects of the tools that you need. This map is not gridded yet, so I'm going to show you how that works. But before that, I want to explain how I was actually able to get this map. So just a little preamble here. Zovia is a digital artist that has been a community member and kind of an ally to FGC since the beginning. She creates maps digitally online, with I think she uses Paint Shop or excuse me, Adobe, and she has a Patreon. If Lady Shel would like to link that, this is where
Just
the
dead.
thank you. This is where this map actually came from as her patron, and it is a large dungeon. Traditionally, she had not done these types of maps because of the limitations of Fantasy Grounds and some of the other things. But now that we have Unity, we can bump up the quality a little bit. So you can go from, 25 to 50 pixels to like about 100. And you can have large maps. This is a pretty good sized map for Fantasy Grounds. I wouldn't recommend anything bigger. It'll get kind of ridiculous. Fantasy Grounds is still kind of a work in progress, so it has some flaws and some little issues with it. But for the most part, it seems to be working okay for the line of sight, anyways. And there is a methodology to this. You want to try to start with one tool set at a time because you have doors and secret doors, and then you have also uh, terrain, and then you actually have the borders for the walls. One of the things I stress is that you do not put the lines right at the edge of the wall, but rather maybe like in the middle, so that you can still see some of the detail that the artist has put into this. So I'll show you that shortly. So before we get started, Are there any questions about mapping or map tools? Because I'm going to actually take you through how I was able to bring this map up. So that way, if you're doing this yourself or you want to do this in the future, I'm not starting in the middle. I'll actually show you exactly how I got to this point. So I'm going to minimize this for now or close it. And basically, when you start a new campaign, you have an assets folder, which is on the bottom right-hand side. It's a round circle. Your images are going to be stored in a campaign folder, but not until you bring them over. So what I'm saying is, if you have a custom map, not one that comes in the module, those maps you can still find the traditional way, and they'll be embedded in a module. But these are maps that you're actually adding yourself. So what I've done is create a new group here, and then I went to up on the top where the assets title is. I clicked on images, and as you can see, I have a campaign folder. Well, that folder will not exist until you open up folder on the bottom. And I don't know if you'll be able to see this or not, but I'm going to put another map into this group by adding it to the folders, which I've done. And once that happens, then this folder shows up. So you have to add it on the back end before this campaign folder bag shows up. So you have to create a directory or put a file in your campaign folder for images, and then it will show up. So this campaign thing doesn't show up until you add your own custom content. So this would be where you would put your if you have vectors for or PNG files that have like furniture and that sort of thing. This would also be where you'd put your handouts and where you put your maps and any assets that you want to use. Now, portraits and tokens are stored in different folders. So if you want tokens for your actual NPCs and your players, you have to put that in a tokens folder. But in this case, I'm just going to be working in this custom campaign folder. And when you open that, it will show you all the images that you actually, and it takes it a few minutes. So when you're accessing these folders, it's going to take a little bit. So now that I have them added to the campaign, what I've done is I went ahead and created a new group in image. And I took one of the maps from this collection. This is called the Blood Wolf Depths. That's the name of this map. She has several versions. Some are not gridded, some are. Some have lighting, some have no lighting. Some have furnishings and no furnishing. So there's quite a variety here. I went ahead and took one of them that has furnishings and light because I want to see all the bloody details. But that is how you add a map. So once you have your assets folder, you're going to add that map to your maps and images folder or your section here. So you do that by dragging it over. Now, once you've done that, it'll create a link like this, and then you can pop up the map. And sometimes when you add it, it'll pop up itself. See, that's how long it took for it to open. So you got to kind of be patient with it. So right now, this is kind of the full view of the map. As you can see, you got all this space off to the side. You can zoom in by clicking on the map and rolling your mouse wheel back and forth, like I'm doing now. Sorry if that makes you dizzy. And if you want to center the map, like maybe you have it, way over here or somewhere far away, or I don't know, you can right click on it, click view, and then click zoom to fit, and it'll go back into the shape of the frame that you have. So you have to have this frame kind of set up where you want it, and then you position the map within it. That's a little bit different than classic. So is there any questions up to that point?
I'm not seeing anything in the chat.
Okay.
If you have a question, please put it in the chat. And as I stated or you may not have seen it if you weren't here when I typed it. If you type the word question before your question, I will be able to relay it to Laerun.
Thank you. Now, like always, we can edit the map as we had before. You have to unlock the map first. So up here on the lock tab, you're going to unlock it. And what you're going to be able to do is zoom in, and you'll see these map tools appear up on the top. So the map tools are basically for editing, for putting line of sight, putting a grid on it, a mask, effects, whatever. You have a layer. So whenever you want to work on something, make sure you click the layer first. Sometimes, I don't know why, but it'll change layers if you accidentally click somewhere else. So you have to make sure that you have the correct layer or the correct image selected. When you get multiple images on this list here, it'll get confusing. So you got to be careful with that. The next thing is you have different modes on the top. So play mode is when you're actually playing and everything's done, set in place, and when your players are connected, and that's when they can move around the map and such. When you're in layers mode, this is when you're going to add your assets, such as your effects or your little images that you want to add. So I'm going to zoom in on this map some, and I'm going to look for something to place, a placeable item. So right now I'm just waiting to see what kind of assets I have available because I didn't add any manually. If you were a Kickstarter backer, you got or you received a bunch of different map assets so that you can add them to your projects. It's better, if you get your own, of course, but my assets folder. So that's why it looks like I'm on pause right now. And you really have to be patient with it or it's going to drive you bananas. So until they get the memory optimization done, it's going to be a little slow.
That's probably one of the most best reasons not to move your campaign over because it will probably drive you all crazy.
Yeah, that's a true statement. If you are thinking about putting your campaign over into Fantasy Grounds and run it from there, I might do a one-shot test, but I would not move an entire campaign over yet, simply because it's not done. It is a little slow and it's not optimized, and you will go nuts. And there are some networking issues too. So be careful if you do it. And if you have problems, make sure you point those out into the correct area in the Fantasy Grounds forums. That is the place where you want to complain and take your anger and frustration out. Is do it in there. Don't do it on your players or your fellow gamers. Anything that goes wrong, there's logs that can be created. There are text files that can be generated. And I think Fantasy Grounds has it on a full verbose. So everything that is wrong or could go wrong leading up to that moment, you can take a snapshot of that log and send it to them. And yep, Lady Shell put it in the chat. Report all errors to that place. It
Can
is
you
in the
show us
chat.
where the folder is where you would get that report?
I honestly don't know.
Isn't it the one on the left, top left, next to your data
Oh,
folder?
yeah, maybe, but I can't show that now because I'm in the
Oh,
program.
okay.
So anyways, back to the mapping. If I click on my assets list, it'll pull up the assets that I have, and then I'm going to click on images because I don't want to look for tokens or portraits. So I think I should look for a rug.
What kind of rug would you like to look for?
Probably a bearskin rug.
Oh, how about that?
Well, I don't have a bearskin rug, but I do have an old rug that I can place. So what you're going to do is in the assets folder at this point, I'm going to put a rug in front of this portal. So I'm going to take this old shock bolt rug here and drag it to the map. And if you notice, it puts this on the top layer and it is selected now, so I can adjust it. Sometimes though, when you're in the middle of working with the map, your cursor will go down here and you'll end up rotating your entire map. You want to make sure that you're on the item that you're going to choose. And I'm going to scale it to be a little bit bigger. So rather than dragging it, it's better, I think, to use the width and the height. So instead of 2.6 by 5.1, I'm going to go with 2.7. And as you can see, it kind of grew in shape.
You trying to make it the same width as the bricks or the
Kind of, yeah.
tiles, rather?
Yeah, I kind of want it to match the width, but it's going to be centered in front of this portal so that when they walk, there's the carpets right there. And I'm going to rotate it. So you can put the angle in here. So if you go 90 degrees, you can do it like that instead of trying to do it by hand because it can be a real pain in the butt. And then when I clicked on it, for some reason it clicked away. And now it's clicked on the map. So I need to make sure I'm still on that. And then if you want to move it, you just drag it up like that. Now I click on a different item. That is on a layer that nobody can touch.
Question.
Yep.
Spencer wants to know, can you click and drag the dots on the corner, or do you have to use the numbers on the side window?
You
I'm
can
thinking
use,
like
yeah,
your, what do you call it, publisher, like
you
Publisher
can do
Works,
that.
or
You can do that, but I don't recommend it because you cannot drag perfectly every time. So in other words, quickly you can probably do that with a big object. If you have a bunch of small objects that you're trying to place in a small area, it will drive you bananas. So I wouldn't even bother. I would use the controls on the top right. But yes, you can rotate it, but it's not perfect and it ends up stretching the thing oblong. It doesn't work very well. You
good
either,
question.
yeah, it is.
No, I said good question.
Another thing is if you had an object that you wanted to stamp, so let's just say I'm going to put some blood splatters on here. So I'm going to go back to my assets folder and I'm going to click on images and I'm going to search for blood. I'm pretty
While you're
sure.
searching, Mod Rider wants to know, is there a unit to the 2x6 and by 1x7 or whatever? What's it called? Is it like pixels, or
I think it's
what are they?
pixels.
What do they represent?
I think it's pixels. I don't know for sure because, well, it actually pixels because I haven't put a grid on the map yet. So that's what I should have done to begin with. But I'm trying to show them the assets. So here's a blood pile. So I guess I'm going to grab one of these blood splatters. So this is a terrain object. And what I'm going to do is instead of making it a static image and just rotating it and moving it up and down, I'm actually going to make it like a stamp or like an asset that you can tile, basically. So I'm going to go to the tile little stamp here, and I'm going to drag that asset over onto this square here. So it almost becomes like a brush, so to speak. So now I have this stamping like mode, and I can just click where I want those to go. Once you're done though, oops, Control Z is your friend. So if you need to undo something, you can still use Control Z. I don't know how many undo levels it has, but I'm sure it's a lot. And you have a color picker. So if you want to reshade, I think you can reshade it a little bit. I think you can add more coloration variants. Yeah, so you can kind of lightly recolor it. It doesn't show as well because of the type of object it is. So anyhow, that's how you would use your asset. Once you were done placing it, you would go back into cursor mode or layer selection. And then you would go onto this area here and click on the blood drops. And like you asked before, you can rotate it, yes. That's not so bad. But trying to stretch it, it's horrible. It doesn't quite, you'd have to be super accurate. So I would just go.
I guess it needs a scale option.
Well, part of it is because I don't have the grid on here.
Okay.
So that's the next thing I'm going to do is put a grid. So I know for fact that this is 100 DPI per square inch. So I'm going to go ahead and click on grid. And I'm going to change the width to 100. And that's 100 pixels. And if you have them link, it'll be 100 by 100. And now that you look at it, it's actually pretty close. That's perfect. So it kind of snapped to the grid. If it's a square item, it usually works pretty well. This is actually a seam, so that's not a line there. And if you think it's off a little bit, you can adjust it like you did in the old days. If you zoom in really tight, you can kind of see some of the seams in there, but it's pretty damn close because it's lined up with these markers, so it's done really well. So that's how you put a grid on it. Now you can also change the color of the grid. So maybe you want to like turn it brown so it blends in more. Or maybe you want it white like it was before so it shows up better. So you can potentially change here. Now it's blue. So you can change the color of the lines. So I kind of like this brighter yellow so it stands out a little bit more. Okay, so basically the grid is on it. That's probably the first thing you want to do. And then start placing your object. So I got a pile of blood and a nice little worship rug in front of this portal. And looks like there's been some activity here. There's some furnishings and such. So now I want to basically start lining out the line of sight. So you can also paint on here. There is a paintbrush. I haven't mastered this yet, but technically you can come in here and draw on the map. So let's just say you have a texture up here and you can actually draw an item in here. Or you can find a brush texture that you like and drop it in there. Or you can even paint with an asset. So if you had the shape of the blood pile, you can use that to paint. So it just depends on your preference.
Got another question.
Okay.
Says, can you change the thickness of the grid?
To my knowledge, no. As far as I know, there's no way to adjust for that. When you come back into the grid controls, there's no option for that. So you can size it, you can adjust it, and you can recolor it. And you can make it visible or invisible, which is kind of cool. But you cannot change the width of the grid itself.
You know what? When you just said invisible, I thought,
Hmm.
oh, that's genius because a lot of times you have a problem getting it to line up on the map, and that way you won't have conflicting lines with, let's say, your tile
Hmm.
floor. Because a lot of times I notice in Classic, you get it where it matches on one side, but on the other side of the map, it's like all off. And, you know, then if it was invisible, you wouldn't notice that.
So you can reset this paintbrush and you can do image painting. But I'm not really good at the paint part, and there's the eraser.
I think if you had a tablet and you were drawing with a pen, it would be a lot easier. I mean, if you're proficient at drawing. Of
Yeah, I'm
course,
not.
if if you didn't have good drawing skill, you could always say it was graffiti left behind.
Yeah, so I'm not very good at the tool for the painting option. But I did make something yesterday with just strictly painting. I made a dungeon and some walls, and you can take tiles and fit them together and all those things. But it's a chore. Once you have the map selection and you're in layers mode, you can you can use the arrow to move the map side to side, up and down, and then you
Does
can
that
also
not
scroll
want to
forward.
go away, or is it just
I'm not sure
lagging?
why it's there. Let me see if I can. That's annoying. See, I might not be on the right layer, so I can delete the layer though. So I'm selecting this layer, the painting, that's gone. Yeah, so you can delete the layer. Okay, so let's see. I want to get out of this mode. I want out. Okay, so that is basically how you place assets. You can paint on here, that sort of thing. Now I'm going to go back to line of sight mode. And this is where you're going to actually plot your points for line of sight. So what I'm going to do here is I'm not going to trace the outside of the wall. I'm going to actually come down the center. And that's so when they enter the room and the shadows are cast, they'll be able to see some of the detail of the wall. Otherwise, you're not going to see much anything. It'll just be like a cutoff. So I kind of want them to see some of the contour of the wall. It's up to you how you want to do it. All right, so this here is not a door, but it is a grate. I think that's what that is, because you have these little lines here. So I want to say that that might be, oh, it's a railing, excuse me. So this is raised up from the center. Yeah, so this is a raised dais kind of thing, or dais. And yeah, I don't know how high it is, but I imagine it's at least a couple feet up. So we might end up turning this all into terrain. Because when you first walk in, you have this staircase to go up. And it's only, well, let's see, yeah, it's about almost 10 feet up. So I'm probably going to have to turn that into terrain. We'll see. Terrain will allow you to see the object once it's open. So once you go up the stairs, you can actually click on the terrain and the light will come through. So I might make that terrain. That might be a cool thing. And then part of the stair. So I might take like this first layer here and make that terrain. But first
How
of
did
all,
you um how did you figure out that it was 10 feet up?
well, if you look at the stairs on the scale, you're saying that each one of these is 5 feet, right? But you're going at an angle. You don't know what the angle is, but if you count off, 5, 10, 15, 20, and then you divide that by ratio, like if it was 90 degrees and you knew the angle of this, the longer angle, you can kind of figure out how height the height is.
Unless those stairs were made for goblin feet, then they might be only, like
Well, I'm talking about
6 inches wide or something.
right, but I'm
Okay,
talking
I
about
see what you mean.
the width of the
Right.
staircase.
I understand what you're saying.
So I'm thinking it's close to 10 feet, it's probably 8 feet or something like that. So if that's the case, anything up higher than your ankles or your kneecaps, basically, you can potentially make that into terrain, which means that when you walk by it, it'll cast a shadow. And that way people can hide behind objects like these chairs here. You can make that terrain if you want. It just depends on what you're trying to show. But for now, the first thing you want to do is you want to find all your doors. So if I was going to do this entire dungeon, I'd go through and do all the doors first. In this case, I'm not going to do the whole dungeon. I'm just going to do the one room. So this is the doorway, and doorways are fairly easy to do. You click on the door icon. Right now I'm in the pointer mode. So you click on door, and then I'm going to go to rectangle because that's basically roughly the shape I'm going to use. And I usually go on the very outside of the door, and it doesn't have to be exactly perfect. You mean you can be close, and that's your door right there. So that defines the doorway. I don't think I have any other doors except for this portal right here. And this is an entirely different thing. If we had the portals extension written for this, we could probably place one here and have it to where you teleport into one of the other rooms or something like that. So
Hear
as you
that,
can
Diablo Bob? We need your portals.
so here's a red portal right here, so you can go in here and go to this area. So this would be a very good map for that. Okay, so let's see. So now we're going to do the line work. So once you're done with the doors, then you want to and the secret doors, you want to define your walls. So usually I start in about the center, and I'm just going to draw a line here. So you want to start with a point, and if you hold your mouse button down, it'll actually make several points. So you want to just click once and then drag after you click it. So I'm going to go into line mode, and then I'm going to click right at the edge of this doorway. And I forgot to change mode. So that's something that you have to get used to. So I went from door mode to wall mode and then line mode. So you got to get used to switching between these, and that's something that takes a while to get used to. So I'm actually going to start down here. And once you start getting used to placing these lines, it does get easier. It's just a matter of getting used to the tool. When you're done placing a line, you hit escape. That way, when you pick up, it doesn't try to continue. So if you're done with a line and you don't plan on going any further, hit escape and it'll take you off that cursor. So now I'm going to go from here to here. And as you can tell, I'm not trying to be perfect because I still want to see structure and I don't want it to be perfect. So if you're one of those folks that needs perfection, good on you, because this will take you a while.
Now another question. Question. Do you have to draw 2 lines, one for each side of the wall? Just came back, so I didn't know if you already commented on it,
No, you
or
don't
will
have
one
to.
line stop line of sight from any direction?
Yeah. So if you're on the other side of that line, it'll stop it. The reason I'm going down the center is so I don't have to put the double lines in there. Because if you try to trace the very outer contour of the brick wall, you are going to lose that picture and that texture, but then you're going to have to use another line on the inside as well. So it's a lot easier just to center it in between.
Another good question. Thank you.
So this line here I'm not happy with. So if that's the case, you have to go into pointer mode to remove it. And then you just click on the point. So you have two modes. You have remove points and you have delete points. So deleting it will actually just, if you click there and you hit the delete button, it'll delete that line. So what I'm going to do here is put another point in here, but you have to go back to line mode. I'm also kind of going slow and deliberate for the stream, but I'm also not as proficient with this tool as I would like to be.
Have another question. If you select a point, could you grab it and drag it to where you want it to be?
I think so. I haven't figured that out, but I'm sure it's just a shortcut key I'm not aware of. I've actually seen it done. I know you can select the key, but I don't know what the command is, the shortcut to pick it back up again and move it. And there's kind of a snap to feature where the lines want to join. So if you're close to a square and you're trying to join it, it'll try to click to that point. So there's kind of a snap to feature enabled. So it's a little less freehand than you think.
Can you turn off the snap to feature?
Yeah, the magnetic snap, I believe, will do that.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's what the little magnet looks like. And if you look in the tools there, yeah, little magnet.
So that was just the outer walls. And now if you want to, like, these are pretty solid, these stones here, but they don't go all the way to the ceiling. So technically these are railings. I don't know if you just put a terrain feature on it, or you could put a solid feature if you don't want the players to go past it. But if you put a solid wall in there, no light can pass through it. So probably be best served by a terrain feature. So terrain features similar to like making walls, except for you will be basically tracing the contour of this item and creating a terrain feature, but the whole item doesn't need to be a terrain feature. I would say maybe these railings and the top couple stairs. So I'm going to go ahead and just do the railings, and then I'll do them as separate objects so I don't get confused. So to make it easier to do a square, there is a square tool, and then you have to click on the tree, which is terrain. So we're going to say that this is terrain here.
I just noticed that the left box is smaller than the right, which gives you the impression that you are going up because the
Yes,
right one is closer. That's
yeah,
pretty cool.
that is. So squares and boxes are really easy to do with the rectangle tool. Again, I'm not trying to cover the entire piece. I just want to get a majority of it. That way you can still see some of the details when you're walking through.
If only every dungeon was just square, things would be so much easier. But pretty
Okay.
boring.
Yeah. So this is part of the terrain, and then I'm going to put terrain on this rail. So that is the mask for the terrain. I'm going to also do the couch and this little end table. So this, I'm going to go into line mode and just trace around like this. And I hit escape, and it's done. Now I'm going to do the couch. I'm going to do these. So another thing you could do on the couches, instead of doing the whole couch, you can actually just do the backing. So I'm just going to put terrain on the arms and the back, and then leave this part open.
Is there a way to demonstrate elevation, like how your
No,
steps went up? How do you think that will be a future
I
thing?
don't know.
Hmm. And I noticed that when you do this, as you're tracing the couch, how you have that line that's coming from where you started reminds me of when you make in Classic, when you make a mask or when you unmask a mask. It's a similar process with the way the line goes. That's pretty cool.
And then I got to do the other arm.
Spencer wants to know why you go through all the trouble of outlining the couch when they could not hide behind it.
Good question. That is something that you have to decide if you're going to do. So if, for instance, if there was a halfling right here sitting on the side of this and you come in the room, the light is going to shine and get blocked by the chair arm. So it isn't just about the back, it's the sides too. So if
What if
you
you had
had
a secret door behind the couch? How would they wouldn't be able
no,
to get to it, right?
correct.
Cuz
They'd have
cuz
to role
the
play it.
okay.
So here,
Moderator says, wouldn't it just mask out the couch and make it not visible to the player?
if I do the whole couch, yes. But when they come close, they can click on it and it will say open, and then the light will shine all the way around it. I'll show you when we get to the. So you have to decide how much detail, or you have to kind of think about where you want the shadows to go. I'm just kind of showing you the features.
I think it's fun to think story-wise what you could do with this line of sight and how it can improve your game.
Yeah, I'm thinking in terms of hiding. Um, so like over here, there is real no place to hide behind the couch, but you can hide beside it. If you were a gnome or something, you could probably hide in here or hide here. So now I'm going to make this whole elevated feature of line of sight. I don't know, maybe I will make it terrain just to illustrate that. And then there's some more stuff. So I'm not going to do the couches. I already done an example of that. The altar, that would stay. You'd probably see the top of that when you came in anyway. But if you wanted to consider this high enough to where they have to walk up and they can't just look, especially if that's 8 feet or higher, you'd want to make this terrain up here. So you could do the same green outlines up here and it would do the same thing. I don't think we need to do that though. It's a big enough area to where they can probably see most of it. All right, so once you have, let's just say we're done. I mean, this is not perfect, obviously, but let's just say you're happy with that and at least pretend. Now what you're going to do is you have to go into the play mode. And then in order to test it, you're going to bring up a character and then put them on the combat tracker first. So I happen to have Lady Shel's character, Hannah. So I'm going to place her on this map, and you have to turn on line of sight mode. So right now that's line of sight. Now it's kind of like the mask mode that you used to be used to in the old game or in the classic, but the players won't see anything. They will only see what their light shows them unless you disable the line of sight. So I'm going to go ahead and grab Lady Shel.
Hey, watch it.
And when you pick her token up, it actually, or when you move it, it actually starts to activate the line of sight mode. So to answer your question, if you had someone hiding in shadows down here, this will cast a shadow. It'll block her light, but if you open this up, it actually lets the light through.
A druid that is shaped, wild shaped to a mouse could hide behind that couch.
Yeah, very situational.
I can't help myself. I'm so detailed.
Also, tokens can be moved in steps. So arrow key will move you to the next square, to the next section. So if I put her there, you can just count how many squares you're moving. Now there is no locking the tokens yet, or no distance yet. So you're going to have to deal with the old way where you just move stuff around. With this locking feature though, or snap to grid, you can count by actually going like that.
Got another question?
Mm-hmm.
Spencer wants to know, question. So, all the green objects can be unlocked?
Yeah. So what I would do is if she was on the staircase and I had this locked up here, or maybe she's right here. If you unlock it, it allows that to pass through the light. So technically these should have probably been solid line, and then maybe the rails would have been texture. So it depends on what these structures actually are. But in this mode here, it gives you a little bit more flexibility. So all that does is it doesn't block you from moving through necessarily, but if you open it, it gives you that dialogue to where the light goes through, I believe. But we'll have to test it on the player side because I don't remember if the player can do it or if the DM.
Can you show us how to open a door that is locked? Or is that going to have to go on the player side?
Okay. So this is a door. Right now it's closed. If you open it, it allows the light through. Now the DM can opt to lock it.
Now I have a question. Who does the unlocking? The player, the DM, or both?
The DM. When a player comes to a wall segment that's locked, they have to either unlock it or ask the DM what's happening with it. That way you can require a pick lock roll or a forced entry.
Sleight of hand?
So they
No.
can't move through the red lines. I know that for sure. They can't move through a locked door. To lock a door, you hold the shift key and you click on the door. Unfortunately, you can lock it when the door is both open and closed, which makes no sense. But You can lock it or you can keep it open. Depends on what you're doing. But the DM has control of that, not the players. What about object? Yeah, so the couch, I think they can, but they have to be close. So that's the issue. If they get close enough to the object, they can unlock it, and that just allows light to pass through. I don't think it blocks them so much. I think it more or less blocks the light through. So I'm waiting for Fantasy Grounds to do its thinking. While it's doing that, just remember to be careful when you move your campaigns over. And you don't want to use gigantic maps. You can upscale them a little bit. Like this map is probably about less than 10 megabytes. You don't want to have a huge whopping map. Unless you're going to play around a table and you're not connected with anybody, then you can probably get away with it. But when you're pushing a map that's this size to the party members, it can be pretty rough. And I don't see anything about preloading images yet.
Especially if you have my internet.
Once you modify, yeah, you can save it, Blazing Ice, but you cannot save the definition file easily and then send that to somebody. There is a tool that's available to SmiteWorks where they can extract the definitions or line of sight. And the other limitation is you can't do it on objects. So if you made an entire dungeon out of drawings and tiles, it won't save with those assets. It only saves with a large map tile, if that makes sense. So if you have a map that's made up of, little tiles and assets and what you call it, paintings, you cannot save that. But you can save line of sight with a map, and you can export it that way. Yeah, just the regular old maps, and you cannot do that with the copyright maps. For some reason, I know people are creating them and they're sending the map to SmiteWorks, and SmiteWorks has a tool where they can extract it out of the database XML file, and then they're able to kind of work it into an existing another module. But as consumers, as end users, we can't do that yet. I don't know if they'll even ever allow it. But I know if it's a map that you created, isn't it built into the tiles? No, it's not. I don't know how they did it, but the tiles are. I'm talking about the little tiles. Like if you made a whole bunch of little tiles and put them together, I don't think it saves as a state. I just think that the X and Y access and on off those sort of things are saved. I don't think it saves the tiles as an asset. So in other words, you can't render a map. So that would be compiling and rendering an image. And I don't think it has that ability to do that. So you would want to do that elsewhere and turn that into a single map. Yes, probably, but there's no way to export that file unless you did a screenshot or something. Or if you did it outside of the program. Yeah, exactly. So you couldn't compile it in Fantasy Grounds. You definitely have to use a different program and then
Like
put it in.
Dungeon Painter Studio
Yes, exactly.
would be able to do it in that.
Yep. So the way they have it now, it's not set up for creators or developers too much. It's more for them initially. So
Well, considering it's beta, so you gotta assume that things could change when it's a fully released program. And if this is something that you want to see, post on the link on the forums and let Smiteworks know that it's something you would like to have in the future.
Yeah, so this is a map made by Zovia. And by the way, the Unity is still thinking. So as you can see that the more you add to it, once you start adding layers and assets to it, it really starts to show that it needs fine tuning. It wasn't too bad until I started adding this line of sight and all that stuff. Then it starts bogging down a little bit. It doesn't want to fully release memory, and then I guess there's a timer on how long the memory is held. It's weird. I don't understand the scheme of it or the schema, but so create a map with a smaller assets and use a third-party program or a screenshot to save it. Go back later. Yes, that's how you'd have to deal with it now. Exactly. But the whole idea was to be able to build inside here and save it, but you can't render or export it. So you're not going to use Fantasy Grounds as a Photoshop, is basically what it boils down to. You get some Photoshop features, but you're not going to be able to render it. So that is an issue with that. But if you're using the drawing tools in there, it stays within that campaign. It's not, I don't think you can export it to another campaign, which is unfortunate because if you wanted that same map and you've done all that work, I don't know how that works, but yeah, so if you built a map in Fantasy Grounds, it would be nice if you can at least use it in a different campaign. I don't know if you can or not. So if there's any other questions, I think that'll about do it. Not a whole lot more to show other than new maps with different shapes and such. But those are the very basics. The takeaway here is getting used to the map tool and making sure that you have the correct tool selected, because for some reason it likes to just select whatever tool it wants if you click away. So make sure you're on the correct layer before you make changes. Yeah, no problem. We're going to put this video up on the YouTube channel, and we have another one up there already. And then on top of that,
You actually have two.
we have another video that covers the launcher a little bit, and we're going to keep cranking these out until we can't take it anymore. So we're going to be focusing on this map tool and line of sight for a while. That way we learn as we go and we help others, and also maybe they will have insight that we don't have. So maybe that one question we had earlier about moving a segment where you want it to go would be a very good thing to research. So maybe we'll look into that for our next tutorial. But I know you can
Blazing
highlight.
Nice did ask a question there about how do things like blindness and other effects work on characters in LOS?
Good question. I don't think blindness can be implemented yet. I think that would be a condition that would probably call on line of sight, and I don't think that's ready yet. I know that people have asked for dark vision, and another thing is the vision is infinite. So the token, if there was no wall to deadhead at, that light of that line of sight would go on forever. So it doesn't accurately have any way to define the light, which I wish it would, because then you would actually have true torchlight. So instead of the light being centered around the player, it would be centered around an effect or a light source. Or if you were carrying, yeah. If you were carrying a torch in your inventory, maybe that would be the way to trigger torchlight. Something like that would be cool, but I don't think they can get that detailed. So it's just a matter of time, and I imagine we won't see anything fancy like that for a couple years. So this is basically what we have to work with for right now. This is the beta. It's March 22nd, 2020. If you see this in the future, just remember that the changes will be rolling out from here till probably the end of April of 2020. We are just merely doing this to get the community used to the idea of Unity and especially the map tools, because this is the most changed aspect of the tool or of Fantasy Grounds. Everything else seems to be pretty much the same. They depreciated the mood lighting. If you make a mistake in your maps, you can actually go to the image now in the images and maps area, and you can right click on the image and revert the changes from there instead of going into the actual module, which is cool because we weren't able to do that before. So there's some other things that are good and some things that they've taken away. So we'll see how that goes. Arc and Forge has that type of thing implemented. Check out their videos to give you an idea how it will most likely work. It's probably, yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it at all. So, anyways, I think that's good. We've rambled for about an hour. Um, give you just a rough idea of how this stuff works. I'm going to have to say patience is your number one friend. Having a plan. So, when you want to make one of these line of sight things, you want to make sure the map is not super complex at first and practice. Just keep on practicing with it until you can't stand it. That's probably the best formula for you to really do it. Yep. So we'll talk to you guys later, Lady Shell.
Okay, I'm gonna post Zovia's Patreon again in the chat. She has graciously donated her maps to us to use for this tutorial. And thank you so much to everybody that showed up and had some questions. And hope you have a great rest of your weekend.